All wings report in.
HouseDog, standing by.
Mother Goose, standing by.
Lock S-foils in attack position. Animal Squadron ready for battle.
Hello there, and welcome back to Animal Squadron. I'm your host, HouseDog, and with me, as always, my favorite person to fly around the galaxy with, Mother Goose. What's up, buddy?
Hey, HouseDog. Good to record this podcast and talk to you again.
It is. Every time we record, I feel like it's been forever.
Right? When in all reality, it's only been a couple weeks, but it feels like longer.
I guess I just need you in my life for constant reassurance.
Same.
Well, I'm excited about today, and to avoid a 3-hour podcast, I think we need to get into it. We're doing A New Hope today, man.
A New Hope.
We are finally on the original trilogy. It's only taken us like 2 months to get there.
Yeah, the film that started it all.
It did. And I'm just going to be honest. I didn't realize how much fun I was having watching this one until like halfway through, where I was just like, man, this is awesome. How'd you feel watching this one before we really get into it?
I felt the exact same way. It was just fun. It felt good. It was, sometimes I think, it's the first one. There were some like little things here and there that weren't perfect. And sometimes I feel like I forget just how good it is. And then I watch it and I'm just blown away.
I had similar feelings. Like the little notes that I do have about things, like technical things, are really what make this movie special to me, and I'm sure what make it special to
a lot of people.
This was their first Star Wars.
Yeah, and that actually is segues to my next note. I wish so badly that I could have seen this in theaters back in 1977.
I mean, it was a monumentous moment looking at it now, but I mean, of course it was amazing back then, but looking at it now, it started an empire without making a pun there.
It really did, though. Like, I think Star Wars, I heard this recently, has made around $70 billion.
I would believe it, and I've contributed greatly to that cause.
Me too.
And I'm not ashamed of it. I will continue contributing.
And I just think it's crazy that Disney bought it for only $4 billion. Because obviously they've made a lot of money in the last 8 years that they've had it, but I mean, most of that $70 billion has to have come from before Disney bought it.
Without a doubt.
Because I think
there's just so much.
Right? Because I think each of the main, I guess the sequel trilogy, each of the films made around $1 billion. And those were probably their biggest films in terms of revenue-wise.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we can talk about that when we get to those episodes. I think we really need to just get into episode 4, though.
I agree, because I feel like we're going to have a lot to say. When do we not have a lot to say?
True. So I want to talk about the scroll and just how iconic it is. And
okay, good, because I was going to ask if you had anything about the crawl, because I don't have much, but I have a little bit.
Yes, this has got to be one of my favorite crawls. But then I looked at it and I was thinking, okay, I'm in the theater, I'm watching it for the first time, it's 1977, and I'm looking at the information it's giving me, and I'm like, this really sets up everything perfectly. Like, I know...
It does.
I know the sides, I know important figures, I know what's going on. Mm. It's just really good.
The thing that got me with it was just the way that the crawl itself is written and the language used within it.
Mm-hmm.
It feels old while also being, completely new, because this was something we'd never seen before.
Right.
And as much as we do talk about, weird children of the prequels, I think both of our experiences early on were with the original trilogy.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure the first Star Wars film I saw was Episode 5. Because I very distinctly remember watching Luke and Yoda on Dagobah. But there is a good chance I might have seen Episode 1 first. Either way, both trilogies were a huge part of my childhood, and yours as well.
It's still a huge part, even today as a grown man.
Same.
So, do you have anything else to mention about the crawl?
No, I do not.
Good, because I don't either. But, directly after the crawl, my next note is, I don't know if there's just something about this movie, like we talked about a little while ago, that just, I don't know. I didn't expect to have the feelings that I had watching this that I did this time. It was something special from the start. And just this first shot of being in space and seeing these random planets and not really knowing what's going on, but we pan up and we see this massive Star Destroyer, and it just keeps going. It keeps coming into the shot, and it just doesn't seem like it's going to end, and we don't know what it is. Now we do, but
right.
Whenever you watched it for the first time, you didn't know what it was. And as that comes into the camera and into the watcher's view, it's just it's just massive, man. It's massive.
It's breathtaking. Like, literally, the crawl ended, it went to that first shot, and my jaw dropped. Like, every time, I'm just amazed at how good it is, especially considering how long ago it was when it was made.
Of course, they have been touched up to what we see now, but
yes.
But even then, a lot of this movie that hasn't been touched up, I still feel holds up very well.
Yeah, it really does.
Some of the stuff you see today isn't even as good as this movie was able to come up with.
Right? And it's because George Lucas was just at the edge of innovation.
I completely agree, but at the same time, I think it was just, I don't think it's my love for Star Wars getting in the way. It's just, this movie had a lot of love and care put into it, and a lot of thought into just really minute details. But
yes,
I already have a first favorite line of the movie, and we're not even really into it yet.
And that would be?
Well, the Tantive IV has been captured and boarded. Well, being in the process of being boarded, and we see our good friends C-3PO and R2-D2 going through the hallways.
Right. So that was actually my next note. The fact that the first two figures we see are droids. And there is a third droid behind them, but that one's not really important.
We don't care about the silver one.
Yeah, but we get to see our good buddies R2-D2 and C-3PO. And I just love that they're the first things we see.
They're very important characters.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, I think that you're the C-3PO to my R2-D2.
Ah, thanks. I agree.
I mean that in only the best of ways, my good friend.
Hey, you know what? Both R2-D2 and C-3PO kicked some butt in their day.
That's true. But my favorite line comes from C-3PO. Well, my favorite line at this point. As they're running down the hallway, we get to hear C-3PO's very optimistic view of, we're doomed.
Yeah, that's true.
And I don't know what it was. I wrote this next note, and it's simply, I'm just happy. And I mean, this is like 4 minutes into the film, and I was just already having a good time. Like, we talk about, our feelings of Star Wars and what it means to us a lot. And, I guess it was just that feeling of, it just reminds me of all the good times I've had watching these movies of, with family members or with friends like you. And, it just gives you that feeling of home. And you just think of all those wonderful things and memories that you've shared with people, through these movies and the other different types of Star Wars media that there are. And I was just happy. So I just wanted to write it down and just remind myself that I'm just happy to be watching this, experiencing it.
Right? A lot of times I have to remind myself that throughout all the course of human history, I'm lucky enough to have been born at the right time to experience Star Wars.
It's a great privilege for sure.
Yeah.
So another thing that I had never noticed before, or really given it any thought, I guess, is once Darth Vader has boarded the ship after the initial stormtroopers come in and blow the door open, is Vader looking around at all of the dead bodies with his hands on his hips.
Right?
It struck me as odd. Like, I mean, he's obviously a very intimidating character. We don't know who he is, really. He's just this figure.
Right.
And he just has his hands on his hips, and I don't know why. It just made me laugh.
No, I get it. Because at this point, the audience doesn't know who Vader is. And I mean, he's very obviously a villain. The stormtroopers have come in. They've obliterated the rebels that are trying to hold them back.
Right.
And here comes Darth Vader in almost all black in a sharp contrast to the stormtroopers who are in all white. And like, even though he comes in and it is a little awkward, you can also tell that, like, he demands respect.
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Just his presence. I understand what you're saying. But we immediately, if you can't tell just by the look of Vader, very soon we realize that this man is not a good man. He's holding up a guy off of the ground by his throat.
Right.
And just the lines that he has right there after he chokes the rebel and throws him against the wall of, find those rebels, I want them now. And he's literally yelling in a hallway to these people.
Right.
You just automatically know this guy is not a good guy.
No, and there's a lot of anger behind him. And,
he's a force to be reckoned with. You can already tell.
And I think what's really great is, obviously you wouldn't know this if you hadn't seen the prequels, but along with the anger, there's also a lot of pain. And it's very subtle. But you can tell that he's not a happy person.
Well, he definitely has something going on in his life. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And then the shot of Leia with R2 in the hallway putting the secret plans in him, and it's my first musical note. Hearing Leia's theme again, for what is the first time, it just, I don't know, man. I can't lie. It got to me. It's one of those beautiful pieces of Star Wars music that just, every time you hear it, it's special.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
It kind of caught me off guard whenever I heard it, and I was like, oh man, it's Leia's theme.
Yeah, and just that whole, it's just so iconic. There are just several, overall, the entire film is amazing, but there are several just really iconic scenes, like the opening scene where we see a Star Destroyer for the first time. Leia putting Death Star plans in R2-D2, just so iconic. And there are a couple more. For example, Luke standing looking at the two suns.
You mean like the entire movie?
True. No, the entire movie is amazing, but like overall there are just several just really, really good shots that stick out above the rest.
No, there are those just picture perfect shots that they're just one in a million.
Yeah.
So are you ready to jettison down to the planet of Tatooine?
Oh, Tatooine. I am, yes.
Good, because I can't get over 3PO and R2-D2 are just wandering for a bit, and of course they have that typical fight that best friends do.
Yeah.
3PO kicking R2 to me is, of course, hilarious, but I thought about it for a second, and I was like, 3PO knows he's a droid.
Right.
3PO knows that R2-D2 is a droid. So
Yeah.
he knows that kicking him really doesn't do anything. So then I dove into it a little bit deeper, and I was like, well, if they can't really feel pain, then 3PO literally just kicked him to be petty.
Right.
That's all it was. It was just a petty outburst. And I was like,
he's just a little mad.
It's just one of those things that the writing was, we'll talk about it more as the movie goes. Of course, this movie gets made fun of, like a few of the prequels for, a couple of the hokey lines and parts of the acting. But to me, like 3PO kicking R2-D2, even though they're droids, is just, it's hilarious writing to me. Like that's comedy.
It is, and it's so, like, on brand for Star Wars.
Right, but it was perfect because this is a space opera, and we've got two friends here fighting each other in the middle of a desert because they can't figure out where they want to go, and they both think they're right.
Yeah. This is also... This was actually what I want to talk about next too. I wrote down that C-3PO's lucky to be alive. Okay, it's already been established that R2-D2 is a killer.
He's just helping out.
He's just helping out. But if he can take down super battle droids, C-3PO, I'm sorry, is nothing. R2 could end him so fast. But he loves him, and he doesn't.
I can't tell a lie. R2 is a killer. I'll admit it.
R2's a killer! But he would never hurt C-3PO. They've been through too much.
As much as they fight, they're still best friends at the end of the day.
Right. And we don't know everything they've been through in the last 19 years since we saw them in episode 3. But, I mean, a lot of that, what we're referring to, happened in the Clone Wars. Or during the Clone Wars, not just the series. But C-3PO's memory was wiped, so he doesn't remember any of that. So he doesn't know. He doesn't know just how savage R2 can be.
He doesn't. But we get to see a crate dragon skeleton.
A little tiny crate dragon.
A little tiny crate dragon. But then we get to meet some Jawas.
Some Jawas. It always makes me so sad seeing how excited that C-3PO is to see the Jawas.
The sandcrawler.
Yeah.
Seeing the sandcrawler in the distance. And then
getting caught and sold.
I mean, just another example of like funny moments that aren't like slapstick comedy.
Yeah.
Is R2 being captured by the Jawas and him being hit with the electricity, and then the little noise he makes and thumping over to the ground like a trash can.
I know.
It
I
makes
know.
me laugh every time. I don't know what it is about it. It's just, it's hilarious.
Me too. I literally wrote, "Poor R2, how the mighty have fallen."
He went from the hunter to being the hunted.
We still stand. We still stand.
Of course. But I do have a question for you.
And I most likely have an answer for you.
For some reason, even though I know it's probably disgusting aboard, I'd really like to spend an afternoon on the Jawa Sandcrawler, I think.
No, I get it. I would too. I would too.
It's just, I want to know what they have in there.
Right? They had some really interesting stuff. And there was, so I don't know what it was called, but there was a droid, and it had a very like human-like face, but it was almost
I know
like
what you're talking about.
it was almost like a clown face, and it was so creepy.
Yeah, I don't like that one either. I never have. I know exactly which one you're referring to.
Now,
But we get to see our buddy Gonk.
we do get to see Gonk. We stan Gonk.
Gonk is the real hero.
The rebellion would have lost without Gonk.
They would have. And I don't know what it is, but again, I just kept finding comedy in this movie. And after R2 and 3PO meet up again aboard the Sandcrawler, we see that the stormtroopers have made their way down to Tatooine.
Right.
And they're searching the escape pod and everything. And they're looking for signs of, where to gone. They see tracks. And then the one stormtrooper picks up a piece of metal and goes, "Look, sir, droids." And that line is just so goofy to me. Like,
It's very goofy, yes.
but it
It's
kind of
great.
establishes that the stormtroopers are of course like a force to be reckoned with whenever they're in great numbers and everything, but they're also kind of goofy.
Because unlike the clones, the stormtroopers are real people, just everyday soldiers who signed up for the military.
Exactly. It gives them a bit of humanity instead of
Right.
just people in armor.
Right, exactly.
But no, that another line that just gets me every time.
Same.
So we get to the home of Owen and Beru Lars, and I paused it because I was really surprised that we don't meet the main character of the movie until 17 minutes into the film.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. It's crazy if you think about it compared to, most movies. You have your immediate characters or the main characters immediately from the start.
Right.
If not shortly after, but 17 minutes in, that's a lot of like storytelling
Yeah.
before we even meet one of the most important characters.
Yeah, and not just in this film, but the entire saga.
Well, I think we can agree that while the trilogy is about our trio, Han, Leia, and Luke, I really think A New Hope is really Luke's movie.
Yeah, it's his hero's journey.
Right, it's the beginning of the hero's journey.
Yeah,
So I would say that A New Hope is definitely all about Luke, even though we do get those important players other places.
yeah. And I think something that I've really, obviously these aren't the only things that these films are about, but I will still stand by the fact that the prequel trilogy is about the fall of Anakin Skywalker, and the original trilogy, again, not the only thing, but a big part of it is the redemption of Anakin Skywalker.
I agree. I don't really have anything to say for or against that.
Nice. Anyway, we should probably keep going in our progression of this film.
Yes. So the droids are being sold to Owen and Luke.
Right.
And we get to meet our dorky teenage hero. And C-3PO is having a dialogue with Uncle Owen. And he winds up talking himself into a job and gets a job for R2 as well.
Right. So I think that there's actually a really funny, theory about this whole meetup right here. So the red droid that
Are you about to bring up the fact that R5 is force sensitive?
Yes. R5D4. There's a theory that
Yes, I know the theory. That's
yes,
not canon, my guy.
I know
you
it's
can have
not
your
canon.
wild dreams. You
I
can
know
have
it's
your
not
wild
canon.
dreams.
I know. But for our listeners who may not know, there's a theory that R5D4 was a force-sensitive droid and purposely blew himself up so that
He had
R2
a bad motivator.
so that R2 could go with them. But no, it's not canon, and I don't think anywhere besides this theory we've ever seen a force-sensitive droid, from my knowledge.
No, and I think that theory comes from a comic, if I'm...
Yes, yeah, I
Right,
think so.
So we have to bring it up. The Tashi Station line.
For power converters.
It gets made fun of a lot, and
It is cringy.
It is a cringy line, but it's just like making fun of Anakin in the prequels.
Right. I mean,
I don't really see the point of it because
okay.
it portrays who he is. Anakin was a kid. Luke
Right.
is 18, 19 years old. Think about how you were at 18. You were still pretty
cringy.
annoying and whiny and cringy.
So cringy.
And of course, if your parents told you, hey, I need you to do this, and you already had made plans, with friends or to go do something, it seems like the world is ending because you can't really see outside of your own little box yet, especially if you look at Luke, who is very much confined in a box.
Right. And so that's a really good point to bring up because he was the same age that Anakin is in episode 2. They're both 19.
I knew I could count on you for something. I mean, for the most part, you're a terrible partner, but
For the most part, the worst
every
partner.
every now and again, you do have little nuggets of, I guess,
knowledge.
I don't want to go as far as greatness, so I guess I will say mediocre knowledge at best.
Wow. Thanks. This just made my day.
I'm here for you, buddy.
I appreciate it.
So, we get to see inside Luke's little hangout, and what is Luke doing? Playing with a toy spaceship.
What a man. But also, me too, Luke. Me too.
I mean, I can't really talk. I still like building Legos and stuff, so
And I respect that. Good for you.
maybe Luke playing with his fake spaceships is it's Legos for him. I don't know.
Exactly, yeah. And, I think also he just wants to leave. He wants to get off of Tatooine, and a spaceship is how he would do that. And so there's that extra little layer of depth to it as well.
Right. I'm sure he's imagining not being on Tatooine or being at Tossie Station picking up those power converters.
I'm sure he's imagining himself flying around the galaxy fighting the Empire. If only he could do that somehow.
If only. And just the dialogue between 3PO and Luke down here of 3PO calling him Sir Luke.
Right?
I thought that was funny. And it's just Luke. Oh, okay, sir. I love that.
I do too.
I know the movie's been touched up, but I don't think it's been touched up that much. The hologram of Leia still looks pretty good. I mean, there's only so much remastering you can do with these films because of, what the type of film and what they were shot on.
Right.
But even then, the hologram looks really good.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks fantastic.
And just hearing old Ben from Luke after he hears the message from Leia, I'm just like, oh man, it's happening. Here we go.
Yeah, makes your heart hurt a little bit though, hearing old Ben.
It does. But also just how smart we see how R2 is. And I didn't put this together until later, but R2 telling 3PO to tell Luke that if he removed the restraining bolt on R2-D2, he might be able to play back the entire message. And R2's already formulating his plot to escape, and Luke tells him, well, I don't see the hurt in taking off your bolt because, well, it's not like you can really get far.
Right.
R2 is a master genius.
He really is. And then the second the bolt's taken off, he's like, oh, what message?
Right? A genius little astromech, if I say so myself. And okay, I hope you're ready to play our famous Animal Squadron podcast game. I don't know if you noticed this, but whenever Luke walks out of the shop after talking to the droids because it's time for dinner, C-3PO has dents in like his butt. Did you ever notice that?
Why were you looking at his butt?
Because this shot was panned out that way and he's turned around. And I had to like rewind it a little bit because I couldn't tell if it was the reflection off of his, off the metal. But I do believe that 3PO has dents from their adventure so far on Tatooine.
Shame.
It was just a small detail.
How
it was a small detail.
Dare you?
Okay, yeah, I'm watching it right now, and he definitely has dents in his butt.
You had to rewatch it.
No, I watch the film as we talk, so I can see what I'm talking about.
Yes, yeah. True.
No, 3PO definitely has dents in his buttocks.
Well, he did get escape pod jettisoned down to Tatooine. I almost said Earth.
Right, but it was just one of those things that I was like, oh, like a small detail that, these things, whatever they are, droids or...
Right.
It was just a small detail that I was like, they really thought about stuff.
No, so he has a very large dent on his head.
Right, of course.
And I was trying to play through, like, if maybe we saw him actually get that through the series, which I don't think we do.
No. I think he has it in episode 2 already, whenever we meet him on Tatooine.
What a shame, George Lucas. You could have shown us the dent incident and you didn't.
I'm sure there's a comic or somewhere that explains a dent in his head.
I'm sure. I'm only being sarcastic. I don't really care. But it did get me thinking.
Maybe you're not supposed to know. Maybe it's just one of those things, Elijah.
Sometimes the mystery is better than the reality.
That's true. But something that's not a mystery that we get to see, blue milk.
Blue milk. We all know how Luke likes his milk.
He certainly does. On a more serious note, as soon as Luke is sat down at their dinner table that they have, the look that Beru and Owen share whenever Luke messages or Luke tells them about the message he just discovered, and he starts talking about old Ben. The look that Owen and Beru share of... I really like Aunt Beru's character in this movie for the 5 minutes that she's in it.
I do as well.
I think she's important as small of a character as she is. Just like I think Uncle Owen's a very important character for as small a role as he is.
Right.
And just the look that she gives Uncle Owen whenever Luke brings up old Ben is, you can tell that she knows we've tried to keep it away for so long. It's finally made its way to us, no matter how hard we tried to keep him away from these things.
Right. They were never going to keep it away from him forever.
No, and I think they knew that, but it's the accepting of that reality that's the hardest thing, you know?
Right. And so we get a very important line during this meal where
Would it be, he's got too much of his father in him?
No, actually, that is a very important line. But before that, when Luke and Owen are talking, Owen says he, in Obi-Wan, died around the same time as your father.
Right. That Obi-Wan and Luke's father had gone at the same time, which is,
right,
from, I think, the way we look at the story, completely true.
Right, which we mentioned in our last, well, I guess not our last podcast episode, but the episode before that.
The Revenge of the Sith episode.
Yes. That both Obi-Wan and Anakin really died on Mustafar.
They did indeed.
Anyway, before I start crying, do you want to talk about the line you just mentioned?
Yes. Owen and Luke fight about, Luke he's thinking about, well, since you got those new droids now, maybe I can, get out of here a little bit earlier. And Owen says, harvest is the busiest time of year. I really just need you here for a few seasons more. And Luke just wants to leave so bad. And eventually Luke just gets, upset, as anyone in his situation, I believe, would. And he leaves the table, and Aunt Beru says, you can't keep him here forever, Owen. He's got too much of his father in him. And
right.
Of course, Uncle Owen says, that's what I'm afraid of. Mm-hmm. Because they've raised Luke his whole life, and I'm sure they see what a good person he is, and they met Anakin all those years ago, and
right, and they
don't want to see him fall the same fate that his father did.
Right, because when they first met Anakin, he was a hero. He was a Jedi Knight
who just happened to murder a bunch of Tusken Raiders and then bring back their dead mom.
Right, but the thing is, he was able to go get her and bring her back, and even though he killed those Tusken Raiders, and in our eyes and in the eyes of the Jedi, that was the wrong thing to do, in their eyes, he saved them from constant raids.
Okay, what do you mean our eyes? Because I totally believe in the massacre.
Oh, okay. From my eyes, and potentially some of our listeners, it wasn't the right thing to do.
Totally warranted.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this in episode 2. If it was my mom, I don't know if I would have acted differently. I don't know how I would have handled that.
But one of the most masterful shots in the film of Luke staring at the twin sunsets with the wonderful music in the background, and
right?
I think everybody can relate to that shot. Everybody at some point in their life has maybe not done that exact thing of staring out at the sunset, but everyone's had that moment in their lives, and you can really connect with it, where you just want something new, and you want your life to begin. And that's how I view that scene, is Luke just wondering, when will be the last time that I see these twin sunsets, and I'm somewhere doing something not maybe super important, but something that I want to do, and when will my life begin? Right,
because I mean, he's been living for his uncle and his aunt. They've been taking care of him, but I mean, at this point, he's working for them. He's taking care of their property and their droids and everything that needs to get done.
Right. But one of the great questions that I have is, what is Aunt Beru making in the next shot whenever she's just putting things into the pot?
True. Again,
I want to know. Is it some sort of soup? What is it?
there probably is some comic out there that explains what's in the pot.
Someone has probably researched it greatly and figured out that she's making something. It looks good.
Crate dragon stew.
It's possible.
Yeah. If you get them while they're young and they don't turn into Sarlacc pit eating monsters.
This is true. But how much now, even as a grown adult man, do you want Luke's speeder that we see him take to go retrieve R2?
So bad.
I relate to Luke's speeder a lot. It reminds me of my first car. You remember my first car?
I do, yes.
Yeah. Just seeing Luke's speeder reminds me a lot of my first car. But I'd still want Luke's speeder for sure.
Same.
And we see Tuskens for the first time, overlooking Luke, about to snipe him out of his speeder.
Those sand people.
Exactly. So eventually Luke gets attacked by the Tuskens, and he's saved by a weird figure in a robe with a strange scream. And then, of course, the classic line delivered by the hero, everyone's love, Obi-Wan. With a classic
Kenobi.
"Hello there." I love that that's the first thing he says.
Me too.
But after Luke wakes up and he says, you know, "Old Ben, is that you? I'm so glad to see you." And another one of those things I didn't pick up on, Ben calls him Luke. Like,
right.
Of course people know about Old Ben because the dialogue that Owen and Luke had earlier at the dinner table, you know, they call him a strange old hermit, a weird man that lives out in the desert, whatever.
Yeah.
So he knows of Old Ben Kenobi.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing in there that says that they, you know, ever met or anything like
Interact.
that. But yet, there's no correlation of direct interaction. But yet Ben knows him by name. And Luke doesn't question it at all.
Right.
I thought that was interesting.
You know, when you're a kid and someone mentions you by name and you're just like, oh, you know, they must know my parents.
I guess so. I mean, Tatooine's a massive wasteland, so I guess it wouldn't be that hard to know a great number of people.
Right. But I would also not be surprised if they had some very minor interactions.
I don't know, though, because we know from old EU stuff, once Obi-Wan got to Tatooine, he watched over Luke, but there was no interaction, and Uncle Owen would not let Ben interact with Luke at all. He wanted him
gone
as far away as he could be from Luke.
Right.
So I don't think Ben would ever jeopardize his life's mission at this point by even chancing meeting Luke.
Right. Which makes me think, I mean, obviously Uncle Owen knows what's been going on. If I was in his shoes, I feel like I would want Ben closer. I wouldn't want him close, but like close enough that like, hey, if Darth Vader rolls around, you know, maybe there's a little protection there.
I don't know. We know from context clues that Owen does not like Ben, so.
Oh yes, no, Owen does not like Ben at all. But, and I mean, obviously, Obi-Wan does stay close enough to protect Luke. But I just feel
always
like
always watching. But you know, I just feel like Owen could have been a little nicer. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
how did you hear, or not hear, how did you feel whenever you heard Ben say, Obi-Wan Kenobi? Now that's not a name I haven't, or that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. And he just has that look on his face, and he's doing the classic, like Obi-Wan beard stroke, and
Right.
it just, geez, man. I'm so glad we're children of the prequels, because we get all those memories of who he was before in this other life, before he was Ben Kenobi, and it hurts so much more.
It hurts so much more. And Ewan McGregor just did such an amazing job as Obi-Wan, and kind of molding his performance off of Alec Guinness.
While not being Alec Guinness.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, ever since Christian Bale did Batman, anybody else that does Batman is just doing Christian Bale to me.
Right.
I akin a lot of roles to that series, because it's like the Joker. Ever since that series, you can't have a Joker as good as
Heath Ledger's
Joker. Thank you.
Yeah.
So yes, I completely agree. Ewan did a wonderful job with this role while giving a performance. He made it to where you could see how he would turn into who Alec Guinness was portraying with his performance.
Right.
That was a very roundabout way of talking, and I hope it made sense.
It made sense to me, if that makes you feel better.
Only a tiny bit.
But, okay, can we talk about the amount of disrespect that Obi-Wan put on R4-P17? His droid from the Clone Wars.
Yes, R4, yes. You added the last part, and I just wasn't there. I was somewhere else in my brain.
No, that's okay. I always think it's funny when he tells Luke that I've never owned such a droid, which could be interpreted as I've never owned an R2-D2 unit specifically, but also kind of makes it sound like he'd never owned a droid at all.
Well, I mean, you can also think about it this way. The journey hasn't started yet.
Right.
Ben was just protecting Luke because he had gotten himself into this situation with the Tusken Raiders. He had no choice but to step in at this point, because his mission is to save Luke at all costs.
Right.
So you could think of it as Ben's not revealing any of his story yet, because there hasn't been any influence to stray to another mission yet.
Right.
So that's how I think of it as, is he still can't give away any part of his old life to make Luke question anything.
Right.
That's how I've justified that scene in my head, because it hasn't aged well, because we have everything that we have now.
Right. No, I completely agree, and that's how I look at it as well. But also, R4 died for this man.
R4 was just a lousy astromech.
I was about to take a drink of water. I almost spit water all over my computer.
He was a lousy astromech. He couldn't even defend against the buzz droids.
Stupid R4. Couldn't fight off some buzz droids.
But speaking of droids, our man 3PO. Getting pushed off the hill and losing an arm.
That guy, he does not have the best luck.
No, the absolute worst.
Yeah. But you know what? He does his best, and that's what matters.
He does. Well, I mean, he tells Luke to just leave him. So
Right.
I don't know about that.
Well, he was willing to give up his life for the protection of Luke. And you know what?
Elijah, he's a droid and he had only lost his arm, and he tells Luke to just leave him there to die.
True.
He's a bit dramatic.
He's a lot dramatic.
A lot. But much like the Sandcrawler, I would like to spend an afternoon in Ben Kenobi's home as well.
Yes, I have a couple notes from Ben's home.
Well, please tell them, because I'm ready to talk about Ben's story.
Okay, me too. But my first note is just about the Clone Wars and just how happy it makes me every time. I mean, obviously it breaks my heart because it was a horrible, horrible time. But also it just makes me happy to have him reference the Clone Wars. And I remember, it was shortly after I watched episode 3 for the first time. I went back and watched episode 4, 5, and 6. And I'd forgot that Obi-Wan had even mentioned the Clone Wars. And it blew my absolute mind that he did, and that far ahead, George Lucas had planted that little seed.
Mm-hmm. He created a whole universe.
Whole universe.
With popsicle sticks and construction paper.
What a man.
What a man. But Ben's story here is just, the way he tells it is just knowing everything that we know. Like we've said many times, it's just, you imagine all of those little scenes he just describing about the Clone Wars and meeting Luke's father and who Luke's father was. And of course now we have really cool videos that people make of those edits of. If you haven't seen it, I highly encourage you to go YouTube. Just YouTube like Ben Kenobi talking about Clone Wars, and people have edited in this scene that we're talking about with flashbacks to, the prequels and now Clone Wars, and it's amazing. It's really heartbreaking, but it's beautiful.
Yeah. It really is, but it always makes me really sad.
And then whenever Ben gets to the end of the story and, he talks about how Anakin was his best friend, and then, how he's dead, and I just wrote down, man, the look on Obi-Wan's face, and this is why I really like what Alec Guinness did with this role, is you can just see by just the way his mannerisms and how he does things and the way he tells a story, that this is a man that has been through a war.
Right.
I mean, I just wrote down the PTSD is real, because
right.
as he's telling the story to Luke, he's reliving every part of it, as I'm sure he has for the past almost 20 years, every day.
And you can really tell the sadness in Obi-Wan, just his eyes, his voice, the way, his mannerisms, and it's just it's so amazing, because Alec Guinness didn't know really anything about what actually happened during the Clone Wars. George Lucas didn't really know exactly at that point.
No, it was just an idea.
Right.
Just a seed, as you said.
But oh, go ahead.
Who wants to go first? Who wants to go first here?
You can.
Whenever Ben's explaining the Force to Luke and he's given him his father's lightsaber, the way he explains the Force, I think, is very important, because it reminds me a lot of what Qui-Gon tells young Anakin in The Phantom Menace. And Ben describes the Force as something that surrounds us, penetrates us, and binds everything in the galaxy together.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really beautiful.
It is. He boils it down to simple terms, but yet it's still very expansive on what exactly this thing is.
Right, and it's enough to pique people's interest, because at that point, that is all people knew about the Force. And as this movie goes on and as the other films go on, of course we learn more, but that's really the first time we learn about the Force, and it's just such an amazing way to explain it.
Right, but then you can flash back to the Phantom Menace and, like I said, what Qui-Gon tells Anakin about the Force, and you can connect the dots that obviously this would be Obi-Wan's viewpoint on it due to Qui-Gon being his master.
Right.
But poor young Luke and his narrow mind. I've been away too long. I have to get back home for dinner.
You know, he just gotta eat. I'd be hungry too.
But you can understand Ben's struggle here.
Mm-hmm.
Of, he tells Luke, the reason you don't know any of these things is because your uncle thinks you would have joined me on some damned fool idealistic crusade. I love that line. I think it's great.
Just like your father did.
You're right, just like your father did. And I love that line whenever he's telling Luke about the story, and then at this point he's trying to convince Luke that he's got to learn the ways of the Force and help Ben on this mission because he's getting too old for this stuff. But you can also see the struggle within Ben of, my mission isn't over, but it's suddenly drastically changed. Now I'm being put in the position of putting this kid that I've been tasked to protect in immediate danger.
Right.
But it's my only choice.
Right. And I think something else before we kind of move on that I did want to talk about is, he tells Luke the story of his father and how Darth Vader turned evil and killed not only the Jedi, but Luke's father as well. And it's just really sad. I just feel so bad for Obi-Wan because, yeah, it was a little shady, but I do think this is something that comes up a lot, is why did he lie? Like, I think Obi-Wan made the right decision here. Because from a certain point of view, he is telling the truth, and I don't know. How would Luke have reacted if he found out his father was Darth Vader right then and there?
I mean, it's just like Uncle Owen telling Luke that Obi-Wan had died with his father.
Right.
He thought it was the best thing for him.
Exactly.
And I think one of the other reasons Ben told Luke the story that way is he trained the greatest Jedi there was.
Mm-hmm.
And just because of, it's not the whole reason, but part of it was that anger that Anakin had. He completely did a 360 or 180 and became someone else entirely. And I'm sure he fears that with Luke, because if Anakin's this kid's father and he's even close to the same as him, he's obviously the greatest hope, but also, again, the greatest danger in the galaxy.
Right.
Are you ready to go back to the Death Star?
I've got one more note, and this is kind of less about this here, but it's something I noticed throughout the entire film. We've talked before about the pronunciation of Alderaan, but throughout this film, characters are constantly pronouncing it either Alderaan or Alderaan. And I just
it's just like Princess Leia.
Right.
Some people say Leia, and then some people in the film say Princess Leia.
Exactly, yeah. Just an interesting point I wanted to bring up.
Different dialects, different places, just like we have in the real world, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. Well,
so now we're ready to go to the Death Star, yes?
We are ready to go to the Death Star.
Great. First big point. The Emperor's completely eliminated the Senate. Not that big of a deal, but kind of, because we don't know what the Senate really... I mean, they're already living under a Nazi regime at this point. So.
Right. They were more of a figurehead.
But my next two notes here are they're having this like boardroom meeting within the Death Star, and Darth Vader has some of the best lines in this part, and I love it. Him saying, the technological terror that you've constructed. I just love that line. It's awesome. And then obviously whenever he's choking the man and says his lack of faith is disturbing.
Right. Now, I did have a note on that guy. He calls out Vader's devotion to this ancient religion. And I think at first my thought, and I think a lot of people's thoughts, go to the Jedi, and they're like, is it really an ancient religion? It's only been 19 years. But in this playthrough, or not playthrough, but this watch through, really he's talking about the dark side and how the Sith hadn't been seen in the galaxy for over 1,000 years.
I mean, but it has been 20 years. I mean, just think about World War II, even though it's been so long. Well, not really that long, but long for us because we obviously weren't alive for it. I mean, Nazis don't even seem like a real thing anymore.
Right. And no, I completely...
That's kind of a bad example to compare Nazis and Jedi, but it's what I have, so it's what I'm using.
No, I completely agree. The galaxy has changed a lot in the last 19 years. But again, at this point, he is a Sith, not a Jedi. And the Sith had been following the rule of two and had been in hiding for a very long time.
I think any way you look at it, I agree with you.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
No problem. But
that was really my only note here. So before we go back to Tatooine, I'll let you know.
Great. I've only got one thing, and that's
Perfect.
the fact that Vader listens to Tarkin.
Right?
Which is interesting because we have this obvious, very dark, brooding force that is Darth Vader. But he listens to this little skinny man in this boardroom for some reason.
He could kill Tarkin so easily.
I mean, he proved that literally 20 seconds ago.
Right.
Just something interesting.
Interesting, which Leia points out later that he's on a leash, which he is.
Very much so. But now we're back to Tatooine. Luke and Ben stumble upon Jawa Sandcrawler being destroyed, and just Ben's already figured out what's happened. But the dots that you see Luke literally figure out in his head, whenever he's like, but if, stormtroopers did this, and, well, if they find out that these are the people that sold us the droids, that would lead them back to home. And just seeing him, like, connect the dots in his head and figure it out.
Right.
But Ben's already miles ahead of him.
Ben probably felt it in the Force the second that Uncle Owen and Aunt Peru were attacked.
Right.
I mean, he's incredibly intelligent, and he's fought in a war, and he just knows these things. So he would have put it together extremely fast either way, but, the Force helps.
Definitely.
So something I wanted to point out here, and I'm sorry, HouseDog. We've had this discussion many times, but we're going to have to talk about it again on the podcast. Obi-Wan specifically says only Imperial stormtroopers are so precise.
I believe he said accurate.
Or accurate.
There's a difference.
There is a difference. Anyway, I am on the camp of people.
Maybe he did say precise, but I want to say he said accurate. Oh no.
Whatever he said. Either way, I strongly believe that the stormtroopers are not as bad of soldiers as the Star Wars fandom makes them out to be.
No, they're not.
Yeah, which I will talk about a lot more in detail later when we get there.
Okay.
Okay, do you have anything? I have one more note here before Luke gets back to his home. Do you have anything else here?
Next thing I have is about the homestead, so
Okay.
carry on.
I think it's so funny because so you're talking about Luke putting together those dots. Well, he puts them together and he's running home, and Obi-Wan yells out, "Wait, Luke, it's too dangerous." And then he just stands there, like literally in the background. He doesn't move to try and stop Luke, nothing. He's just like, "It's too dangerous," and then stands there completely still.
Fair point, but again, remember whose kid this is.
Of course.
And Ben's been through this before. Luke is definitely Anakin's son, so he's already seen this story, and he knows there's no stopping him.
Right.
That's how I put it together in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, Luke does arrive home, and it's pretty dark. We see two burning skeletons.
Right. It was very disturbing. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, compared to today, it's pretty soft. But you think about back then, and this is marketed as like a
kid's film.
like a space fantasy kids film, and there's like half kind of fleshy burning skeletons in a shot.
Right.
That's pretty hardcore.
It's very dark.
I would have to agree.
And it's sad. But I don't know if Luke would have gone forward with this journey.
No, that was the thing keeping him there, and he even tells Ben that in the next scene. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. He said, "There's nothing left for me here."
Right. I mean, not only did he lose his family, but his entire home was burnt.
Right.
Do you have anything else for here?
Nope. I'm ready to move on to the most wretched hive of scum and villainy that we've ever seen.
Okay, I actually have something before then.
Oh my gosh, Elijah. I'm tired of this game. You did this to me last episode. You're doing it again.
Listen, the tables have turned, my friend.
They certainly have, and I'm not okay with it.
Well, you told me you were tired of holding the podcast up on your shoulders, so, I had to switch it up a little bit.
I have to carry the podcast for the first, 4 episodes, and this is what I get now. The guy who's hung up on every line and scene and little piece of metal that he sees.
I'm not gonna lie, I was not prepared for how in-depth, and this isn't a bad thing, but I was not prepared for how in-depth you were wanting to go with this podcast. It's a really good thing, and I'm glad you did. We just started. I had no idea, if I'm being honest. I was just kind of like, oh, okay, here's some notes. Star Wars, yeah, I like that. And you were on it.
Must analyze everything.
Must analyze everything.
Tell me your note, friend. Tell me your note.
Okay. I never noticed that they were collecting and burning the bodies of the Jawas.
How did you not notice that?
I don't know. I just was more focused on what they were talking about, and I don't know, even C-3PO, I don't know if you saw, but he literally had a dead Jawa.
He throws a body on there.
Yeah. I never noticed that before.
I like it.
That's kind of messed up, HouseDog, if I'm being honest. Little sus.
It'd probably smell really bad.
Right, because I don't know if you've seen...
Burning flesh smells really bad in general, but burning Jawa flesh is probably turned up to 11 on the stank factor.
Because not only were they basically trash collectors, but they were also... I don't know if you've ever seen a Jawa without its mask, but they're little rat people.
Well, there's a lot of stipulation on that, what they really look like underneath there. I've seen a bunch of different drawings. I've seen the rat drawing that you're talking about, and I've seen another drawing of what they look like.
I thought the rat drawing was from an official comic, but I could be wrong.
It's been a while since I researched Jawas, so at this point, either of us is just talking out of our butts for the most part.
Either way, it was stinky. That was the whole point.
We can definitely agree on that.
It was real stinky, yes. Well, take it away, HouseDog.
Yes, to our wretched hive of scum and villainy. Wonderful line, a line that every Star Wars person knows. But, of course, we get down there. Ben works his magic with the mind trick scene, and not really a whole lot to go over there. He just uses mind trick, which was cool. And,
Right.
But the more important thing I think here is Ben leading Luke, obviously, to the bar scene coming up. And I don't have a lot to write or talk about the bar scene because I was just watching it. But it reminds me of episode 2. It's like Ben has Anakin again with Luke.
Right.
You know, he's telling him these things, and they're just kind of going through life together. And I imagine it's like what Ben's wanted for all these years again.
Right. You know, he loves Luke. Luke is his best friend's son. Like, he really cares about him. And now he gets the opportunity to actually get to know him and to share the Jedi lifestyle or the Jedi way with him.
Well, it's been so long since he's had somebody by his side like that again.
Right. He's been alone. Now, I did want to talk about the Jedi mind trick just a little bit. Nothing crazy.
Here we go again.
No, this is really the first instance of the Force that we get to see. Like, I think...
Right, the Force in action.
Right. When people think of the Force, I think a lot of times the first things that come to mind is the telekinesis, the lifting things with your mind, or, you know, the Force push. But it was the Jedi mind trick that we really got to see first. Well, you know, besides Darth Vader choking that man.
Which is just as important.
We got a light side technique. We got a dark side technique.
One's more fun than the other. Take that as you will.
Which is which? I'll let you
You'll
decide.
never know.
Okay.
No, the bar scene is classic Star Wars. We get to meet our
Classic Star
boys,
Wars.
Chewie and Han, baby.
Yep. And I love this scene because they don't just walk into the bar and meet Han and Chewie. It's a little longer of a scene where it's just showing us the different alien species. There's music going on.
Yes.
People are having conversations here and there. It makes the world feel real. It makes it feel like there's a world outside of the story that's happening.
Well, it's the westerns that George Lucas drew inspiration from.
Right.
And loved it. We talked about it on our Mandalorian episode. You know, the bar scene and just what that show's inspired by. Even though it's not directly done by George himself, like I said again, Dave Filoni has been his student for quite some time now, and
Or maybe you could say his Padawan.
yes, for sure. But I'm not sure who's the master these days, man. It's getting pretty close.
It really is. I think.
But before we get off topic, because we do it so much, the
Let's
bar
keep
scene
going.
is that classic Western bar shot that we get of there's all these different characters. You wonder, who's this guy, what he's doing there. We see a different person. Who are they? What are they doing? But it's all different creatures, and it doesn't seem out of place. It doesn't seem odd. I mean, it does in the back of your head because we're normal human beings and we don't see these things. But yet it's real and it's relatable. And that's because George drew from real and relatable forms of media and past movies and past poetry and books and things like that.
Right.
And made it his version and what he perceived as important morals and values and what the hero's journey is all about.
Right.
And how we get to these places without just going, okay, we're stuck on this planet here. Now we're going to go here.
Now we're here.
It is that, in simplicity, that's what Star Wars is. But in between point A and point B is an entire book's worth of storytelling.
Right. So moving forward, Luke has a little run-in at the bar, little scuffle.
Hey, we're wanted men on 12 systems.
Yeah. And I really... So obviously, Obi-Wan pulls out his lightsaber, cuts off that creature's arms. I don't know his name or the species name off the top of my head. But
I'm going to be honest, I used to know his name, but I don't anymore.
yeah, I think I did too. The two things. Obviously, this is the first time we really see a lightsaber in action, and the arm is bloody, which a lot of people have called out. They're like, it's supposed to cauterize a wound. I don't know, maybe Obi-Wan's lightsaber's just, it's gotten a little old.
Maybe Obi's a little rusty and he didn't make that clean of a cut. Maybe the alien's blood is different than other things. Who cares? We got to see somebody's arm get chopped off.
Okay, no, that's actually a really good point. I hadn't thought of that. Its species, the temperature that it would take for it to cauterize the wound might be completely different from ours. That's a really good point, HouseDog. My mind is blown.
You know, these are the things that I think of.
Good for you. I'm so glad we're doing this podcast together.
Me too.
But I'm sorry. I have one more.
Go
note
ahead.
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
Okay, but
Keep going.
I just wanted to point out how dangerous it was for Obi-Wan to pull out his lightsaber. Obviously, first watching the film, if this is your first one, you don't really know. You just see it and you're like, oh, that's cool. But for the last 19 years, Darth Vader, his Inquisitors, and the Empire have been hunting down Jedi and killing them. So it was extremely dangerous for him to pull out his lightsaber.
Took a lot of guts.
It took a lot of guts, but you know what? He did what he had to do.
My next note is simply just loving Han Solo and who he is.
Han Solo is amazing.
Just the talk between Ben and him, talking about their passage and how it's going to work out. Han's really selling his abilities and his ship. And that's okay, because he did make the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs, and that's important.
He did, and good for him.
But they strike a deal, but that scoundrel Han Solo can't get away that easy. He stopped by the bounty hunter Greedo.
Oh, Greedo. Last time we saw him, he was just a wee child.
That's a deleted scene, and we've been over that.
Go check out our podcast episode 2.
But yeah, so obviously everybody knows Han shoots Greedo. But
McClunky.
The line that Han says as he's leaving the bar, sorry about the mess, and then just gives the guy some credits. I'm like, Han's just a bad dude.
He really is. He does what he wants. And I think that also really helps. Obviously, there's a ton of things, but this is one of those things that helps separate our world from the Star Wars world. I mean, you couldn't just go shoot someone in a bar, hand the bartender some money, and walk out. Like, that just won't happen.
You can in a Western movie, Elijah.
In a Western, but not modern day USA.
It's true. So, Elijah, I want you to talk about this scene of Han and Chewie getting to meet with Jabba before Luke and Ben do, because this scene was originally not in the movie. It was added later in the special editions, and we see a bunch of bounty hunters, including Boba Fett, and a conversation between Han and Jabba.
Okay, so I thought this was incredibly interesting. I'm glad they added it in. Jabba and Han, they talk, and Han's able to he's kind of able to sway Jabba into not killing him, to just let him go, to let him be. And I just think that's really, it really shows Han's character because, I mean, he's this smuggler. He's doing what he needs to do to survive, and I really love that.
He's a scoundrel.
He's a scoundrel. That's the word I was looking for. Now, HouseDog, I want to ask you, and I think I know why this is, and I really want to talk about it. Why, or did you notice that Han called Jabba a human being?
Yes, I did, and I was hoping you'd bring that up because I think I know the answer.
Okay, I think I do too, but I'll let you go.
It's another perfect example of how Han, quite frankly, just talks out of his butt, and I think that was a slight at Jabba, plain and simple, because Jabba's obviously not a great person, and that's why he said you said human, correct? That's the line?
Yeah, he called him a human being.
Yeah, because Jabba's obviously not a human being, and I think plain and simple, that was just a slight at Jabba.
Okay.
Because Han's just that funny.
As an in-universe explanation, I really like that. I think...
just to me, I don't think there's any other explanation than Han just being Han right there.
Right, in-universe, yes. But I'm guessing that because they did film that scene and it got cut out, this was before Jabba was introduced into the series, so Han, it's CGI, so we don't know what Han was really talking to when they first recorded it. But or Harrison Ford, I bet that there was just a human stand-in that Han was talking to, because again, we hadn't seen Jabba yet. We didn't know who Jabba was, and Harrison Ford might not have known either. George Lucas might not have known. I don't know how early he planned Jabba the Hutt in the series, but, or, you know, at least the fact that he was a slug creature. So there was probably a human stand-in, and you know how good of just improvising lines Harrison Ford is. I would not be surprised if he just said it to whoever that human stand-in was and just kind of went on his day. But I really have no way of proving that. That's just kind of a theory. But I really like what you were saying about him just being that type of guy and was just making a jab at Jabba.
I would say so. But overall, are you okay with meeting Boba, even though this scene wasn't originally in it?
Yes. And the reason I was okay with meeting Boba is because obviously we know he was a bounty hunter. He was working for Jabba the Hutt anyway. But also we don't really get to see him do a lot. So just seeing him early and getting to see him again, I like. The more Boba Fett, the better.
Yes.
How about you?
I can take that scene or leave it. Doesn't really do a whole lot for me. I think the dialogue in it is, it helps establish Han's character a bit more. Like I said, I don't know if it really moves the movie along any. We already know Han's in trouble from the bar scene.
Right.
So if you're looking at it that way, it's a bit repetitive because we know that Jabba, whoever this person is, has already put a price on Han's head. And I mean, if I'm just looking at the movie plain and simple and critiquing it, putting that scene in doesn't really make sense because we already know, like I said, due to the bar scene with Greedo, Han's in trouble. And meeting Jabba in the docking bay and Han not being killed there doesn't really make sense if you look at it that way. But
right.
Again, that's pure criticism.
No, I think
overall I'm okay with it being in there because we do get to meet Boba.
I think I agree with you. I really do. And it doesn't progress the story any. I think you make a really good point about how it doesn't really make sense why Han Solo wasn't just killed immediately. But
because with this conversation with Greedo's already made it clear that Han's got a huge price on his head.
Right. But I also liked what you said about how it really shows and helps develop Han's character, because he does. He talks himself out of being murdered.
He does. That's Han. So I
That's
like that we
Han.
get to see more of Han. But overall, I could take or leave the scene as a whole.
Right. So just to back it up a little bit, we get a scene of Darth Vader basically saying that Leia's resisting the mind probe, and I was thinking about it, and I'm pretty sure that it's probably because she's force sensitive. She may not know it, and Darth Vader may not have realized it, but I would not be surprised if that's what helped her resist the mind probe.
Could be.
Could be. She's also her father's daughter.
Well, we know Leia's obviously a very resilient woman already.
She is.
Just from the little interaction we've had with her. But Elijah, we're about to meet a really important character.
We're about to meet a really important character.
You don't know who I'm talking about.
I do know who you're talking about.
Okay, it's after we meet Boba. Who is it? Tell me who it is. Who you think it is?
The Elephant Man who turns them
Elephant
into
guy. Elephant guy. Yes.
You thought I wouldn't know.
For once, you have not let me down. Now, what is Jabba's pet's name?
Crumb. Salacious Crumb.
I'll give you bonus points today if you know what his middle name is.
I don't know his middle name. I didn't even know he had a middle name. Let me Google that.
It's Salacious B. Crumb. I don't know what the B stands for.
Well, I guess you continue talking. I'm going to Google this.
But I am proud of you. You remember Elephant Guy. So, yeah, nothing really happens with Elephant Guy. He just tells the Empire that he spotted Ben and Luke and the droids.
Right.
But a small note here. Of course, Luke's saying what a piece of junk about the Millennium Falcon, which is blasphemy, sir.
Blasphemy. It's a beautiful ship.
It is. I like the fact that Han has driving gloves.
Me too. Me too.
I just had never really noticed that before, but Han wearing his little flying gloves is hilarious to me. I like it.
Me too. Me too. I'm sorry. I'm looking up this. Apparently the B stands for body. B-A-W-D-Y. Body.
Well, now we know.
Which apparently Salacious Crumbs literally translates to tempting morsel.
Well, we know that Quacky and monkey lizards are a delicacy.
We know that they're a delicacy and people eat them.
We do. So they get off Tatooine and we go into light speed.
Wait, HouseDog, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just looked up what body stand for. Oh no, I'm sorry. We can't not talk about this.
Oh Lord. I'm buckled up.
Adjective. Dealing with sexual matters in a comedical way. Which, in regards to his full name, tempting morsel. So tempting, comedical, sexual way, morsel is his name.
I don't know if that's a direct definition, but okay.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I literally saw it and I just made me
We're gonna
laugh.
talk about wholesome things, about how cool it is to go into light speed.
It's so cool going into light speed.
Yes, it is. You dirty, dirty person.
I just thought it was funny.
No, you're terrible.
I'm sorry. It was funny though.
So yes, we go into light speed, and then Leia and Tarkin have a little dialogue.
Right.
which is the leash line you brought up earlier.
Yes.
An important interaction for sure.
No, it really is an important interaction. I'm sorry, my mind went back to the body thing. Anyway.
Stop thinking of Salacious Crumb, you pervert.
No, it's a really important line, especially like we mentioned before, where she refers to Vader as his dog, like a dog on a leash, basically.
Right. But then, of course, Alderaan gets blown up.
Alderaan gets blown up.
And
RIP.
the way that Sir Alec Guinness portrays feeling that tremor through the Force, it reminded me of like seeing someone have a heart attack, because that's kind of what he looks like.
No, yeah, it really did. I mean, just to feel that much loss and terror and pain in a quick moment, and then just to have it all gone. What an amazing actor, because he just portrays that so well.
Well, I mean, you think about, like we said, he's been stranded on this desert planet. I'm sure he closed himself off from the Force as much as he could.
Right. Then
meeting Luke again.
I don't know. Did he close himself off? Because he was training to become a Force ghost.
I would say I think he had himself open enough to communicate with Qui-Gon, but I think he would only do it in short bursts and at certain times, and never for periods of great length.
Right, because
of the fear of being found.
Right, because the second Darth Vader felt his presence, he would have gone after him.
Exactly. So he feels that, and then Han and Ben's dialogue about the Force is just, it's one of those great conversations.
Right.
And just Luke's training, and then that's no moon. That's no moon, Elijah. What is it?
I actually have like 2 notes.
Oh my! Again with this. Again, if you'd like to be my new partner on the podcast, you feel free to sign up.
If you want to take my place, just remember I do all the editing.
It's really not that hard. A monkey could do it.
Yeah, true.
I'm kidding. I love Elijah. He's great at what he does.
No, I just think it's really funny how confident Han is, because let's be real. Even though Han's a great shot, a Jedi would take him down very, very quickly. But he's never really seen a Jedi. He was extremely young during the Clone Wars.
Well, a fancy laser sword is no match for a good blaster at your side, Elijah.
Exactly. That's the exact line I'm talking about. I just think it's funny how confident he is. But then also I wanted to point out just how quick a learner is. How quick he's learning the ways of the Force.
That's very important. The training aboard the Millennium Falcon is very, very important.
Because he tells Obi-Wan at the very end that he could almost see, the
training remote.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So, like I said, we see our heroes find the Death Star, and Ben says he has, the famous bad feelings line that is, just in Star Wars. And it made me wonder, did Ben already sense Vader?
I'm not gonna lie, he probably did.
Because, we talked about him feeling Alderaan and that really big rush of, just energy and that tremor within the Force. So he's obviously pretty open to what the Force is going on around in the galaxy. That sentence doesn't really make sense,
and we know.
So if he's already that open, how could he not feel
Vader,
his old student?
Because Vader specifically points out here in a couple minutes in the film that he feels a tremor in the Force, and that the last time he felt that was from his master.
Right. That was my next note. was then Vader feeling Ben once they had been tractor beamed on to the Death Star.
Right.
Elijah, I have to tell you.
Okay.
I think this might be one of my favorite lines in the universe.
Which one?
Who's more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him?
Very, very true.
That line is just, it's so simple, yet I love it. I love it so much.
No, the writing is just so good. And obviously it's not all George Lucas. I know his wife at the time, I don't remember her name. I know it starts with an M, but I know she helped write the film, a lot of this film as well. So anyway, my whole point is just the writers for Star Wars have just done such a good job.
Oh, without a doubt. And then, Ben telling Luke the Force will be with you.
Right.
Always. Because Ben probably has a pretty good idea of coming up, or what's coming up next, because, he tells Luke, I've got my own path, and you have years that you have to go on now.
Right.
And they split up to do their separate missions.
I think the second he saw the Death Star, he knew what was coming.
Right. So they've stolen stormtrooper outfits. They're in there. Obi-Wan's left to go do his job. And Luke has devised a plan.
Right. And I did
because they discover Princess Leia is aboard.
Right. Right. And so
take us back.
No, I'm not taking us back. I did want to talk about this because again, so they want to put the cuffs on Chewie. And Chewie freaks out. And if this is your first time seeing it, you just think, he doesn't want to be in cuffs. But after we learn more about the Wookiees and what they've been through, Chewie and his people were enslaved by the Empire.
Wookiees were greatly mistreated by the Empire.
So this is a very traumatic thing for Chewie. It's like a war flashback.
No, I think that's a perfectly fine way to describe why he's so angry about the cuffs.
Yeah.
I just feel bad for the mouse droid that Chewie yells at whenever they're on the way to take Chewie to the prison or the detention level.
No, I do too. I do too.
So they kill everybody in the detention level room. And again, we just get to see Han's character grow more. His whole conversation over the radio with whoever the other guy is at the end of the line. It's just hilarious.
And then he shoots it and was like, it was a boring conversation anyway.
Right.
It's so
perfect.
funny. So I did want to talk about that. I just want to point out, Han and Luke shot just fine with their helmets on. Like, they kind of shoot the place up everywhere. Right, but they're specific.
Luke says in the elevator that he can't see a thing out of this thing.
Right, but if you're paying attention, they are shooting everywhere, but they're specifically targeting at the cameras in the room. And they're hitting, like they aim, fire, hit the cameras. And Go
Luke
ahead.
did bullseye womp rats on his T-16 back home.
True, and Han is a fantastic shot, but my whole point to this is you can still be a good shot with the Stormtrooper helmet on.
Well, Chewie helped too.
Right. Yes, he did. It wasn't just Han and Luke, but, this really segues into my whole rant. I won't make it long, but, people meme the stormtroopers and say how bad of a shot they are, and they specifically talk about the scene that's coming up, their fight here on the Death Star, but we have to remember that Tarkin and Vader wanted them to escape, and we'll talk about this more in a little bit, but they wanted them to escape so they could follow them to the rebel base.
Yes,
they couldn't do that if the stormtroopers killed them.
Also, these characters are wearing plot armor.
They're also wearing plot armor. So, just something to keep in mind as you view and think about the stormtroopers missing all their shots here on the Death Star.
Well, no, that's a great point. My next note is, Vader talking about the Force and just this reoccurring theme of not doubting the power of the Force, because it gets made fun of in that boardroom scene earlier, like I said, about the Force. And then we see it come up again about, just don't doubt the Force. And that's a very important thing later on.
Right. And so something to bounce off that kind of boardroom scene, Tarkin was really the only of those, probably one of the only of those people to be old enough to really be experiencing the Clone Wars and to experience the Jedi and what they can do in war. Or how the Force can be used as a weapon, maybe, to put it as a better example. Not everyone, but a lot of those people in that room were 30s, early 40s, maybe, which would have put them around 10 to 20 when Episode 3 took place. So they were young. They were either still kids or just barely entering adulthood while this is all going on.
Right, but I think the dialogue between Tarkin and Vader, when it's just them alone in that room, is really important. Of course, I already said the line about not doubting the Force, but Tarkin also references Vader as his friend.
Right.
So I just think that's important, but, then the stormtroopers are finally blasted their way into the detention block, and Leia comes up with the plan to go down the garbage chute. I love how Han has to kick Chewie into it, and then his scream on the way down.
Right. So, I just think it's so funny because you can see, in both Luke and Leia, you can see Anakin and Padme. Because we've mentioned it a couple times about how they are definitely their father's kids, but they're definitely their mother's kids.
Oh, yeah. I mean, everybody knows I'm in love with Padme, so...
Yeah. Yeah. But she's dead.
No, she lives on in my heart.
But you know who isn't dead?
Grandmaster 3PO?
Grandmaster 3PO!
Oh, Elijah, tell me about the garbage chute.
My only note... Oh, wait, okay, so there is something... I didn't write it down, but I did want to talk about it. So, when they first see the Death Star, I thought it was really interesting because I think you mentioned it. It's Obi-Wan who says, I have a very bad feeling about this. And I heard that and I was like, oh, that's not the exact line. Like, it's so close. It's basically the same line, but you don't typically hear the very. But then in the trash compactor, you get the just plain, I have a bad feeling about this line. But I literally wrote, remember how a trash compactor almost ended the whole series?
It's true. I don't really have much to say about the garbage chute scene. It was another one of those classic scenes where I just had to
sit and take it in.
Sit and watch it because it's just fun.
I did. This is maybe going to get a little more into the PG range. Or, I'm sorry, PG-13.
Oh, no.
But I noticed that Han kind of grabbed Leia's butt while he was trying to, push her up as the compactor was coming down, or crushing them, basically.
And who made fun of me for noticing 3PO's butt dents? But it seems like you're looking for other things in this movie, my friend.
No, HouseDog. My whole point to this was I just felt bad.
You make fun of my Padme fetish, and then here you are pointing out this, which
No.
I haven't ever noticed. So,
I was just pointing. I just felt bad. That just must have been a really uncomfortable scene for both of them to film. That was my whole point to this. Okay.
Yeah, sure. That was your whole point.
That was my whole point.
We find out a couple episodes ago that you think choking women is okay, and now you're
No.
pointing out things like this.
No.
I think I'm getting a better idea of who you are, even though I've known you for quite some time.
You have known me for a long time. But that is not me. This person you're trying to portray me as, that's not me.
I'm not quite sure anymore.
Anyway, I don't know if you've noticed, but as Obi-Wan's walking around, and this was in a couple of scenes of him walking around the Death Star, and I didn't write it down at first, because I was like, whatever. But then it came up at least one more time, possibly a third, but there is a silver and blue R2 unit that's passing just behind him. And I just really loved that color scheme. I just thought it looked really good.
I do like all the little background droids and stuff that we see wandering through the Death Star.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we've made it out of the garbage chute, and the next thing I have to talk about is Han chasing down the stormtroopers because they split up to try to get to the Millennium Falcon. And Han is chasing down these like 3 or 4 stormtroopers, and then it's the same shot of the same hallway of him running back being chased by like 12 of them.
Right? It's so funny because he's so confident.
Well, I mean, he does this like Tarzan yell to
Right.
run after them.
We've mentioned it. We've mentioned it already in this episode, but it's just so on brand for that Star Wars humor, and it's just great to see that it was established here in the first movie that came out.
Right. And then, of course, the classic swing across the bridge.
Okay, have you seen the old trailer? And I can't remember who put it out, but it basically was a trailer for episode 4, A New Hope. And it was basically like it was portraying that scene specifically, and it called it like a space adventure with love, and it shows Leia kissing Luke on the cheek, and it's just so awkward. It's so uncomfortable.
I mean, I'm okay with it.
Sweet home Alabama.
If anybody's gonna kiss my sister, it's gonna be me.
No, HouseDog. No.
Okay, so the classic swing, and then the most important thing to me is how Vader is just waiting for Ben in the hallway with his lightsaber already on.
He was ready.
He was, and we can talk about the fight scene, but I really think it can be just summed up as, because it gets made fun of because of the speed and the tempo of the fight. But one, Ben hasn't fought anybody in 20 years almost. He is quite a bit older now.
Right.
And Vader is still getting used to his new body.
I mean,
When was the last time, and I know there are comics now, I've read them myself, but when was the last time well, no, actually, I had a different idea. Sorry, I had a different idea, and I meant to remind myself. I just didn't write it down. I think during the fight scene with Ben, disregard the last thing I said about Vader's body. I'll
Okay.
take that back.
okay.
I feel like watching the fight between them, Vader is prolonging it. He's dreamed of this moment for 20 years, of the time he's finally stronger than his old master. And
Right.
he says that with the line, when, the last time we met, I was but the learner, but now I'm the master.
Right.
And so I really think he's just relishing in the fact that Ben's old now, and he can definitely win this fight. So I think
Yes.
he's just playing with him.
So I had 2 notes for it, and that was one of them. Darth Vader is definitely just playing with Ben, and I think you're completely right. Ben, he's old. He hasn't fought anyone in a long time. He's definitely more in tune with the Force side at this point, and less of the combat side of being a Jedi. Which,
Without a doubt.
right, and there's nothing wrong with that. He's gotten older. Things have changed a little bit. But I also wanted to point out that because it gets memed so much, I thought it was like 2 or 3 really slow lightsaber hits, but there was one point, like, they were moving kind of fast. I was like, okay, Obi-Wan.
No, there were quite a few, like, quick strikes in that fight.
It was a lot better than what I remember, and I think a lot of that is because the internet has just memed it so much. I forgot how it genuinely is a good fight. Now, it is very slow compared to some of the other fights, but it's still a good lightsaber fight.
But you can also kind of back that scene up because of what Ben tells Luke back on Tatooine in his home about how the lightsaber is an elegant weapon from a more civilized time.
Right.
Excuse me. So, of course, the sword fights would be, very elegant, thought out moves.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like chess. Chess isn't really fast paced. So why wouldn't the fighting be like that? At least at this point, and especially with the characters that we see here and who they are now.
Right. Now, I also just want to point out that I just think it's funny thing about how confused Vader was when Obi-Wan died.
Well, we've argued about this many great times, and I really like how Ben, his line right before, Vader does take a swing at him, he says, if you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you can ever imagine.
Right.
And he looks over and sees Luke watching the fight that they're having, and he smiles, and he knows it's time.
Mm-hmm. But
so yeah, I don't really know what Vader imagined right then whenever Kenobi was just gone.
Because he kicks the cape, but it cuts to Luke's perspective as him and the stormtroopers start firing at each other. And you see Vader kind of look at Luke, and then he turns back around to look at the cape again. And then he turns around, ignites his lightsaber, and starts running towards, or not running, but walking towards Luke before the blast doors close.
Right.
So you can see that, like, kind of what's going on, what should I do here, as he's just kind of processing what just happened.
Well, at that point, Vader's not really filled in on what's going on the Death Star exactly.
Right. He was more focused on taking down Obi-Wan. That was his goal.
Oh, yeah, it's the only thing he's been thinking about besides Padme for the past 20 years.
We know that Anakin Vader is just a very... he's a very...
Emotionally driven,
but he's also very focused. When he has a goal in mind, he's kind of consumed by completing that goal.
Usually that goal is very emotionally driven.
No, exactly. And this emotion, revenge.
But no, it's cool because even though Ben is immediately gone, he immediately reaches out to Luke.
And tells him to run, yeah.
Tells him to run, and I never really thought about this before, but now we're on board the Millennium Falcon trying to get away from the Death Star, and Han is kind of there for Luke in his own way. Luke's sitting there at the table, and Leia's kind of like just comforting him, but they're on the run now,
right?
And they're being chased by TIE fighters, and Han is just like, come on, kid, we gotta try to get out of here, and he's just kind of there.
Yet. Yeah,
but he's also kind of like comforting him in the way,
right?
You know what I mean? Like in a way that you would think Han's character would do,
right?
It's just like, come on, kid, I know you're having a hard time, but we got something to do, man.
It's more right. I mean, obviously they needed to escape and get past the TIE fighters, but he does care at this point. He cares about Luke. Maybe obviously not as much as he does in later films, but it's kind of a distraction from the pain, a distraction from the loss.
Which is exactly how you would think Han's character would deal with it.
Right, exactly. So they defeat the TIE Fighters, and
They do.
Leia, they're talking again. Leia points out that they're being tracked. She literally says that they're most likely tracking them, and they still go straight to the rebel base.
Well, no, it is very interesting. They all have that dialogue, our three heroes together, and then Leia gets a little angry pants and leaves. And then immediately, what do Han and Luke talk about?
Leia. It's very clear that they are both interested in her.
If anybody's gonna kiss my sister, it's gonna be me.
Literally, Han saying like, "Oh, a girl like her and a guy like me." He can't even finish, and Luke's like, "No."
No, yeah, exactly. I thought that was pretty good too. But so we're on Yavin 4.
We're on.
They've been
Yavin
tracked
4.
here, and they're sitting in that meeting. They finally got the plans out of R2. And this scientist-looking guy explains it, and one of the other pilots says to Luke, like, the exhaust port's only 2 meters wide. That's impossible. And the line I said a moment ago, Luke says, well, womp rats aren't much bigger than that. And I used to bullseye them back home on my T-16.
Right.
Oh, Wait, I'm trying to figure out Okay, no, it happens after this. How after that meeting, Han tries to, like, recruit Luke while Luke is getting ready to go join the Force to defeat the Empire, or the Death Star.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because Han really hasn't known this kid for that long, but he's already like, you're pretty good in a fight, kid. I could really, me and Chewie could use you.
Right.
He tries to not be that mentor role and like that father figure, but he falls into it so naturally all the time without realizing it.
Yeah. Which makes me sad that he wasn't the best dad. But we'll talk about that later.
Much, much later.
Much. Episodes upon episodes later.
And even though Luke's kind of a jerk to Han still tries to make the effort and tells him, may the Force be with you, even though Han's character has stated that he doesn't believe in all that stuff.
Right.
I thought that was important. And then I just love all the ships, like that scene of them like fueling up the X-Wings and like putting the astromechs in and everything. Like just it looks very military.
It does.
Even though they are just like this ragtag group of rebels, it looks very organized and very put together. And that was very well shot and just imagined.
Which I think calls back to an earlier line from the board meeting of the generals and the admirals that are on the Death Star, where the one that I'm pretty sure it's the one that Vader chokes out, is basically telling the rest of them, like, the rebels are becoming a real threat. We cannot and should not underestimate them.
Right, and they mentioned the power of the Death Star, and
right.
Vader's like, no, they can still win.
Yeah. So, do you have anything else before the battle starts?
No, I am at the battle, and my first note is Porkins dying.
Porkins. So I did have one note before that. I'm sorry.
Well, is it about Luke meeting his old friend Biggs?
I did. Yeah, I actually have a couple notes before that. I'm sorry.
I will allow it.
No, I just think it's they obviously have a history together. They're friends. They're excited to see each other, and I just think it's a little sweet, a little sad that they say like, hey, we'll meet up after and we can like catch up with everything that's happened.
Right.
But then they get into space, and I mean, obviously, for our listeners, you probably already know, but our intro is actually a reference to this scene as they are getting into formation.
It is.
And then, I'm sorry. I also pointed out that I think the Empire, I feel like they should have launched their TIE fighters sooner. They didn't launch them until the rebels were already attacking the base. Now I get it. They were really confident that there was no way they'd be able to destroy the Death Star, but still. They launched it a little late. Like, they knew they were going into battle.
Well, I mean, when you think you're the Alpha, there's really no reason for you to be worried.
That is true. That's very true.
And everyone on that Death Star believed that they were not going to be taken out by, like 12 X-Wings and a couple of Y-Wings.
Right. And yet they were.
I mean, like I said, my first note is not Porkins.
Anyway, I'm sorry. That's almost the end of my notes. I don't really have anything much else to say until towards the end of the fight.
Okay, cool. We can go through my notes until we get there.
Perfect.
So I mentioned Porkins. If you don't know who Porkins is, go look him up. He's one of the X-Wing fighters.
We stand Porkins.
Of course. Ben reaches out to Luke here at the beginning of the battle. And it was really funny, but Luke taps his helmet where his comms are and can't believe he thinks he's just hearing things.
Right.
Because he literally lost Ben probably a half hour ago or an hour ago. You know what I mean? It hasn't been that long. So he still can't believe that he would be hearing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, one of the other pilots asked, how many guns do you think they have on the Death Star? Which I thought was interesting, all the cannons and stuff that are probably on there.
Right. And I think I know which you're referring to as they're going to that final run, right? And
it's pretty close to there, yeah.
And they say 20, some below, some below, some on top.
It's some line.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm almost getting towards the end too. The rebels are starting to get some traction, and one of the other upper people on the Death Star asks Tarkin, he's like, "Sir, the rebels seem to be, gaining some traction here. Should I get your ship ready?" And he says, in a moment of triumph, "No way, I'm not leaving." Which was really their ultimate downfall.
Right. They were far too prideful. I mean, I kind of understand why. They literally had a weapon that could destroy planets. It was decked out with smaller guns all over the ship. They had a fleet of TIE fighters. They were so well protected.
Oh, it's insane.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Vader finally gets in the fight.
Right.
Which is interesting.
We
get to see his piloting skills, and Vader's pretty good.
Vader is pretty good.
All right, well, now I'm at the start of the trench run.
Perfect. You can go ahead. I have one note for when Luke is in the trench run, and that's really all I have. I mostly just kind of sat and took in this whole scene.
Right. I only have a few notes left here, but so they start the trench run. Biggs is there with Luke, his buddy helping him out.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe Wedge is the other pilot that's there with him.
Yes, Wedge is there as well.
Sadly, Darth Vader takes out Biggs. And this watch through, I was really more sad about Biggs being gone because, like you said, I didn't notice those lines where they say, we can catch up later and
right.
talk about everything.
I'm not gonna lie, it kind of made me think of you and me and like how we've been apart for a couple years now, and we rarely ever get to see each other.
And then I suddenly die in a trench run against the Death Star.
And then you suddenly die.
But yeah, so first Biggs dies, and then R2 gets his top blown off.
That's actually my note. How dare Darth Vader shoot R2 after everything they've been through?
It is a bit hurtful.
Obviously, I am just being dramatic. If he would choke out Padme, he would definitely shoot R2.
Would he, though? Him and R2 have kind of been through a lot.
Okay, true. But I hate to play this card on you. I hate to pull this card. He literally did shoot him.
It was an accident.
It was an accident. So, as they're going through this trench run, we get the line, the Death Star will be able, I don't remember exactly what it was, but basically it'd be able to shoot Yavin 4 in 1 minute. And it really made me think, it cuts to the guy priming, they've got that iconic black helmet where it's, I don't even know how to describe that shape.
It's kind of like a cone.
Yeah, cone. Yeah, a backwards or sideways cone. But it made me think about the person who actually had to fire the Death Star, and like what I should have talked about this when Alderaan actually got destroyed, but how's that person doing? Like, how is their conscious? Are they okay? Like, obviously they couldn't be. They just killed millions of people, and they were about to do it again. Well, maybe not millions on Yavin 4, but they were about to kill a lot of people.
But if you think you're on the right side of things, you wouldn't feel bad.
That is true. That is true. Just food for thought.
I mean, Hitler thought he was doing the right thing, so... I've mentioned Nazis a lot in this podcast. Please understand that I'm not a Nazi. Perhaps it's a Joseph Stalin point of view. He killed his own people, so he was way worse than Hitler in terms of death. Not as like character point flaw. I don't know. I'm talking myself a hole. Everyone's bad.
I'm trying to defend you.
Defend me, please.
In defense of HouseDog. The Empire and the Stormtroopers were literally a space Nazi organization. Like, there's a lot of parallels you can pull between them. So it's understandable why you keep bringing them up, because they literally were basically space Nazis.
Basically.
Yeah. I mean, the connection's a little more in the sequels. I think they literally do the Hail, a symbol or a version of the Hail Hitler. But
yes.
Yeah, basically space Nazis.
Basically space Nazis.
And it is
enough
not
about space
okay.
Nazis.
Just to clarify.
You know who's not a space Nazi?
Who?
Who saves the day? Who saves the day? Who's coming to save the day for us, Elijah?
Han, Solo, and Chewie.
That's right, man. It's like the first time every time you watch that part. You're already sweating because you don't know if Luke's going to be able to make the shot in the first place. The Rebels have already missed it once. It's all down to Luke. He's shooting it without a targeting system because some creepy old man voice in his head is telling him to.
Said to do it, yeah.
And Vader's got his sights locked in on him.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, who saves him if not that dirty scoundrel Han Solo?
What a man. Because, Vader really, he was about to kill Luke. It was almost over. Well,
I think one thing I kind of glossed over was the fact that whenever Vader is in his tie, he says that he notices or he feels that the Force is strong with whoever that pilot is.
Right, which is actually very important because it's that moment that leads him to hire Boba Fett to figure out who this person is, which leads to him figuring out that Luke is his son.
But that's in a comic book, and not many people read comic books.
True, but it's still important.
It is important. I'm not saying it's not, but a lot of people don't know that thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, they blow up the Death Star.
They blow up the Death Star, kill millions of people.
And we get back to Yavin 4, and I think it's really funny that even after all these years, they haven't fixed this.
Wait, I'm sorry. They haven't fixed what?
So I'm about to explain it to you. I
Oh.
haven't explained it yet.
Okay.
So Luke is being celebrated as this great hero. He's climbing out of the X-Wing. And if you listen closely, Leia says Luke. And as Luke's stepping down the ladder out of the cockpit of his X-Wing, he yells out Carrie instead of Leia.
I've never noticed that.
Go rewatch the scene and listen closely.
I will.
But yeah, I'm just surprised even after all these years they've never patched that audio.
Oh, it just makes me so sad.
A lot of this movie makes me sad, but
Yeah.
also very happy.
True.
But now we're at the metal scene, if
We're-
you're ready to be there.
I am.
So why can't my man's Chewie get a medal?
Apparently, it was incredibly disrespectful for his culture. How true that is, I don't know. That's what I've heard. Apparently, somewhere in a comic or something, it explained that. But I've heard that from other people. I've never read or seen that myself.
I just want my mans to be recognized. I want
I'd-
real to recognize real.
Real needs to recognize real. Hey, he got that medal eventually, though.
That's true.
30-ish years later.
Big spoilers.
Sorry. Big spoilers. Actually, now that I think about it, I do think my sister one of my sisters who regularly listens to this podcast, I don't think she's seen the new Star Wars films yet.
Wow.
Any of them. I think the last one she watched was Revenge of the Sith.
Okay, wow.
So, yeah, big spoilers. Sorry, sis.
So, Elijah, that was my last note, man.
I have only one more note.
I think this is the first time where you've had a last note.
I feel like I've had a last note before, but who knows? This is what, our 7th or 8th episode?
I can't keep track at this point. I feel like it's been a lifetime with you already.
Right. I just think it's really interesting how simultaneously self-contained this story is, while at the same time being so connected and important to the other films. This was the first one. At this point, it was just Star Wars: A New Hope. There was no Episode 4 attached to it.
Right.
There was a chance, at least watching it for the first time, there might not have been a Star Wars 2 or 3. You know? It works really well as its own self-contained story.
Well, for the most part, the hero's journey is completed.
Right, exactly. They destroyed.
There was no need for any other movies.
Right.
The classic tale had been
Completed.
told and achieved, yes.
Yeah. But then
I'm so glad that there was more.
yeah, at the same time it spanned this entire universe. Movies, films, comics, games. It's so amazing, and I'm so happy that it did. But I also recognize that it was its own story, and I just think that's really beautiful.
At this point, it's multi-generational.
It really is, yeah. Well, my friend,
Beautiful thing.
that's a wrap.
It's a beautiful thing.
Bye-bye. I'm just kidding.
What?
I'm kidding. Ooh.
No, I waited all episode for this. I just wanted to talk about how not too long ago we lost a very important person to the Star Wars universe. Mr. David Prowse, the man under the armor that was Darth Vader in the original trilogy.
We did. And I don't know, it's just really sad. It's been almost, I think, 43 years since the original Star Wars came out?
It's been quite a long time.
It has. And so obviously these people have aged, but it never makes it easier. When...
No, and if you know the whole story of David Prowse and just kind of the struggle he had with Star Wars in general, and in my opinion how he kind of got slighted in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, of course everybody knows that it's James Earl Jones' voice, but what I'm really talking about is how he never really got invited into any mainstream conventions because
he was,
he would sign autographs as Darth Vader, and they didn't want him to be Darth Vader because he wasn't the voice. He was just the man
body
in the suit.
Right.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, he didn't know that it had been voiced over.
No, he didn't know that until he saw the movie like everyone else.
And that's... I'm sorry, I love Star Wars so much, but that really was crummy.
I would have to agree with you, my friend. And I think especially now that you look at the prequels and you think of someone like Ray Park, who was literally just... Well, I mean, that kind of makes him sound less. But Ray Park, who was the person that you see as Darth Maul, he's celebrated as Darth Maul as much as Sam Witwer, the man who voices Darth Maul in Clone Wars and Rebels.
Right.
People consider Sam Witwer to be Darth Maul just as much as Ray Park.
Yeah.
And I'm just really sad that for the most part, David Prowse never really got that recognition and love.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us, myself included, and I do feel really bad about this, we kind of laughed when we found out, there are videos online of Darth Vader's original voice with David Prowse actually acting, and it's just so different. I don't know. I just feel really bad how he was treated, and he deserved more respect, and he is Darth Vader to me.
He's Darth Vader just as much as James Earl Jones is.
Yeah.
But no, I just wanted to give a quick word about that with you because it happened not too long ago, and I thought it was important to recognize.
No, that is extremely important, and I'm glad you brought it up.
But on a lighter note, my good friend, why don't you tell everybody where they can find us?
Ooh, before that, we actually have a question.
Do we have a question? Didn't tell me this. So I have a secret to tell everyone. Sometimes Elijah tells me that we have a question before the show. He doesn't read it to me, I swear. He just tells me that we got listener mail.
Yes.
But I'm still just excited.
We have listener mail. So, are you ready?
I'm always ready for listener mail.
All right. This question comes from Apple Juice. Apple Juice, once again, thank you for sending in the question. And if you guys would like to send in a Star Wars related question to have us answer on a potential future episode, you can send those questions to animalsquadron@gmail.com. Again, that is animalsquadron@gmail.com. Okay, the question is, do you think that the Jedi are the true bad guys in the movies? Do you want to take this first, or do you want me to?
I feel like we've kind of halfway addressed this before.
We have.
I feel like you can go first so I can negate everything you say.
Okay, sounds good.
But I also think we might say the same things too.
I think so too. Now, if you're looking for just a yes or no answer, the answer is no. I do not think they are the true bad guys. But I do recognize that they made a lot of mistakes and they were extremely flawed. And as sad as it makes me, I think that Order 66 was the Force trying to balance the Jedi. Because they did do a lot of things wrong, and I mean, we've mentioned it on the show before. While they were trying to follow the Force, they were also equally, and in some circumstances, more so following the Republic than the Force. They were, they were taking kids at such a young age, which is very debatable on if that's good or not. They'd kind of turned a blind eye towards slavery, which was still allowed in the Outer Rim. They treated Anakin very badly. I feel like their separation from emotions, which we will talk about in another episode, which has to do with like the origins of the Jedi and why they do it. But I really do think their separation from emotion was a bad thing that harmed them. So no, I don't think they were the true bad guys, but I do think the Jedi Order was extremely flawed. HouseDog?
Okay, so apple juice. I'm going to try to condense this as much as I can. So are the Jedi the bad guys or not? It's a hard question. To, like I said, try to condense it and make this not another hour-long answer to add to the podcast. If you look at the Jedi, and again, we've talked about it a great deal, George Lucas was inspired by the great myths and, the hero's journey, things like that, Japanese culture, other things, Westerns, all those things we mentioned before. If you think about the Jedi and their tenets and the way they live, if you think about them as the Greek gods, for instance, right? So the Greek gods are these all-powerful beings that control the universe for the most part. But yet they're still flawed, right? They make these mistakes. They do things that normal humans would do, just like the Jedi, right? So as Elijah said, they do make those quick decisions, and they do turn a blind eye to certain issues throughout the galaxy. But it's mentioned several times throughout the series that the Jedi aren't warriors. Qui-Gon says it in episode 1. He can't fight a war for Queen Amidala, but he can protect her because that's what the Jedi are. They're peacekeepers, not soldiers. That's where they go wrong. And everything is they lose sight of that. They stop being peacekeepers, and I think they could have brought the galaxy to a better place if they had not drugged themselves into a war and lost sight of what they truly stood for. Now, do I think the Jedi are perfect? Not by any means. A lot of their ideals are pretty narrow-minded. Not saying that the Sith are better or that the Jedi are bad, but they could change some things. So that's the best answer I can give you, man.
Yeah.
Or a woman. I don't know who you are.
No, I agree. They definitely made some mistakes, but who doesn't make mistakes?
Which is what George tried to teach everyone.
Yeah.
Or one of the lessons within these stories, is at least.
Yeah. There are a lot of good life lessons.
As the great philosopher Miley Cyrus once said, nobody's perfect. You live and you learn it every day until you get it right.
It's funny because both those properties are Disney.
I guess I'm just that good today because I didn't even think about that.
You're that good every day.
But like I said, Apple Juice, hope that answers your question. Again, I appreciate you writing in. Love it. Love hearing from you guys. But Elijah, why don't you take us out of here?
Yeah, definitely. So if you would like to follow me, you can find me. You can find me on YouTube or TikTok. If you just search up Mother Goose 27, you can find me there. If you want to find any of my other social media, my Discord, my Reddit, my Instagram, my Twitter, all of those things are on my About page on my YouTube channel. HouseDog, anything you want to promote?
Just you, as always.
So kind. Well, why don't you tell everybody what they can look forward to next time?
The holiday episode.
The Lego holiday episode. Yeah.
Yes. I'm excited for it.
Me too. It's going to be a good one.
It'll be a great time, like always.
Always. Well, everybody, thank you so much for stopping by the Animal Squadron podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you. And we'll see you next time for the Animal Squadron podcast. This has been Mother Goose.
And HouseDog.
We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.